The sky split open with a loud crack. Eli looked up from his small cabin deep in the forest. It was a quiet night until now. He saw a strange glowing object falling from the sky. It wasn't a star. It moved too fast. It burned red and blue as it crashed beyond the trees. The ground shook for a moment, and then silence returned. Eli grabbed his coat, flashlight, and a small old rifle. He didn't know what it was, but he had to check. Living alone in the forest taught him that strange things needed quick action. He followed the smoke trail until he found the crash site. There, half buried in the mud, was something metallic. It looked like a pod, small and round, with sharp edges and glowing lines. Steam hissed out of its side. Something inside moved. Eli stepped closer, heart pounding. The door of the pod slowly opened with a soft hiss. Inside, he saw something he never expected. A girl, but not human. She had soft purple skin, glowing silver eyes, and white markings on her arms. Her clothes were torn, and her arm was bleeding badly. She looked scared, weak, and very young. Maybe close to 20 in human years. When she saw Eli, her eyes widened. In fear, she tried to back away, but she was too hurt to move. "It's okay," Eli said softly, raising his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't understand his words, but his voice was calm. He moved slowly and carefully. She looked at his face, then at his hands. After a long moment, she let him come closer. Eli gently picked her up. She was light, too light, and her body was cold. She shivered as he carried her back through the forest at the cabin. He placed her on his bed and wrapped her in a warm blanket. He cleaned her wound with care and gave her water. She drank slowly, still watching him with wide, confused eyes. Eli tried to talk to her, but she said nothing. She touched her throat, then pointed to a broken device near her belt. A translator, maybe. Without it, she couldn't speak his language, but her eyes, they said everything. She was alone, scared, and hurt, and he was the only person around. That night, she fell asleep on his bed, her breathing steady but weak. Eli sat by the fire, thinking, what was she running from? Why did she crash here? And would someone come looking for her? He didn't have answers, but one thing was clear: she needed help, and he would not let her suffer alone. Later, while the moon shone above the trees, Eli stepped outside. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind, only silence. Then, he saw its strange lights moving between the trees. Red beams scanning the ground like eyes searching for something. Machines or something like them. His chest tightened. Whoever they were, they weren't friendly. He ran back into the cabin and closed the door gently. The girl was still asleep, but her hand twitched like she sensed danger. Eli grabbed his old tools and quietly checked the locks. He placed traps around the cabin. Silent alarms, just in case. He looked at the girl again. He didn't even know her name, but something inside him told him that if he left her now, she'd be gone by morning, taken or killed. And he couldn't let that happen. As he sat near the fire again, eyes wide open, ready for anything, he didn't know he had just started something much bigger than himself. The forest would never be the same again. The alien girl woke with a gasp, her eyes wild like an animal trapped in a cage. She grabbed the nearest object, a broken metal rod from her suit, and pointed it at the man sitting beside the fire. Eli didn't move, didn't raise his hands, didn't even speak. He just looked at her calmly, his eyes soft as if saying, "You're safe here," without words. Her arm was still bandaged, her body wrapped in a thick blanket, and steam from warm soup drifted through the air. She glanced around the wooden cabin, confused but not frightened like before. The metal rod slowly lowered from her hand. She still didn't trust him, but she wasn't running either. Eli placed a wooden bowl of soup near her and stepped back. Giving her space, she sniffed it, touched it with shaking fingers, then finally ate. Each spoonful was slow, but she didn't stop. She was starving, and the warmth of food touched something deeper inside her, something human. When she finished, Eli picked up a small device. the broken translator from her belt. He had worked on it most of the night, using old wires, batteries, and parts from radios he had kept for years. He pressed a switch and a soft light blinked. Then he handed it to her. She stared at it, then slowly strapped it to her wrist. She pressed something, and after a few beeps, a robotic voice came through. Test. Audio functioning. System unstable. Her eyes lit up with the sound, and she looked at him with surprise. He smiled, just a little, then asked softly, "Can you understand me now?" The device crackled. Then her voice came through, slow and broken, but clear. "Enough. Language, match found, not safe. Danger coming." She looked around, fear crawling back into her face. Eli nodded slowly. "I know. I saw something in the forest last night." She gripped the blanket, her fingers shaking. "They tracked me, not stop. Until dead." Her voice wasn't angry, just tired, like someone running too long without rest. Eli crouched beside her and said, "I won't let them find you." She blinked at him, confused, as if no one had ever said those words to her before. Then she whispered, "Why help me, human?" Eli didn't know what to say, so he just shrugged. "Because you crashed near my home. Because you're hurt. Because I would have helped anyone." She stared at him, not answering, not moving, but her eyes softened. The translator buzzed, and she touched it, frowning. "Device, weak. Might break again." "I'll fix it," Eli said quickly. "Don't worry." Outside, the wind picked up, brushing cold air through the cracks in the wooden walls. Eli moved to check the windows, then quietly opened a hatch in the floor. An old root cellar, hidden beneath a rug. He looked at her, then motioned down. "Come," he said. "If they're close, you can't be up here." She hesitated, but followed, her steps slow and unsure. The cellar was dark and cold, filled with old food jars and supplies. But it was safe, and more important, it was hidden. Eli handed her a blanket and set down a small lamp. "I'll come back soon, I promise." Closed the hatch and covered it again, locking it with a quiet click. Then he grabbed his tools, stepped outside, and walked into the trees. He needed supplies, batteries, and more food if they were going to survive this. But as he returned an hour later, arms full, something felt wrong. The door to his cabin was slightly open. His heart dropped. He slowly stepped forward, rifle ready, trying not to make a sound. Inside, the fire had died down, and the cabin was too quiet. He closed the door gently, his eyes scanning every shadow. He moved to the rug, pulled it back, unlocked the hatch and opened it. She was still there, curled up in the dark, eyes wide open and alert. When she saw his face, she breathed out and said softly, "I thought." "They got you." Eli smiled again, small but warm. "Not yet," he said. "And they won't, not if I can help it." She reached up slowly, touched his hand, and for the first time he felt it. A connection, not between alien and human, but between two souls thrown together by fate. Outside, the wind howled louder, and something in the forest moved. Whatever was coming, it was getting closer. A sound like a whisper scraped across the trees. Not wind, not animal, not human. Something colder, slower, like metal crawling through leaves. Eli crouched behind a fallen log. The morning fog still heavy in the forest. His breath came out in clouds, and he didn't dare move, only a few meters away. Tall figures walked between the trees, not men machines. They were tall, armored, glowing red under their masks. And their footsteps made no sound. They moved with purpose, scanning the ground, scanning the air. One of them stopped and looked up, directly at where Eli was hiding. For one terrifying second, their eyes locked. Then a bird flew past, and the figure turned away. Eli didn't move for another full minute. Then slowly, he slid back through the underbrush, heart pounding in his ears. Back at the cabin, the girl Laura waited near the trapdoor. When he opened it, her eyes searched his face. He whispered, "They're here." Her hand shook as she reached for the side of the wall to steady herself. "No time. We run, or they find." Eli grabbed 2 bags, one for tools, one for food, and nodded. "We'll take the north trail, through the old riverbed." Lura followed him outside, her steps quiet, but every crack of a twig felt like thunder in the forest. They moved fast but low, weaving between trees, under branches, over wet rocks. Every now and then, Lura would glance back, her face pale. Not from fear of dying, she'd faced that many times before, but from fear of being taken back. After 2 hours, they reached a small cave behind a curtain of roots. Eli had found it years ago while hiking, and now it was their best chance to hide. They stepped inside, the air damp and still, water dripped from above, and the smell of moss filled the space. Eli lit a tiny lamp and set it in the corner. Lura sat down and closed her eyes. Breathing hard, Eli sat near her, wiped the sweat from his brow, and asked, "Why are they hunting you?" The translator crackled, then Lura whispered, "Because I escaped." Eli waited, not pushing, just listening. She continued slowly, "My ship was not mine. I was cargo." The words hit him like a stone to the chest. She had been captured, taken from her world, and sold like an object, and now they wanted to drag her back. "I don't belong to them," she said, voice sharper now. "I fought. But they put collars. Pain collars." Eli clenched his jaw and looked at her gently. "You're free now," he said. "As long as I breathe, no one takes you." She looked at him for a long time, then she asked, "Why you do this? Risk so much?" Eli stared into the flame of the lamp. "I don't know," he said truthfully. "But when I saw you in that pod, something told me you didn't deserve to be hurt again." A sudden sound echoed from outside, not far maybe. Less than 100 meters, voices now, robotic, distorted, but speaking her language. Lura grabbed his hand, tight. "They found signal. They near." Eli looked at the cave wall behind them. "There's another exit. But it's small," he whispered. "We'll crawl through. It leads to the high cliffs." They moved fast, crawling through a narrow tunnel, hands and knees scraping against stone. Behind them, footsteps entered the cave, slow and heavy. Eli could feel the heat from the pursuers' weapons, even through the stone. Lura whispered, "Keep going," but then she gasped. Her translator flickered, sparks jumping from the device. It went dark. She tried to speak, but only silence came from her lips. Panic flashed in her eyes. Eli turned to her quickly, cupped her cheek and said, "It's okay, I hear you without it." His voice was steady, and somehow it calmed her. They reached the other side of the tunnel and burst out into sunlight. The cliff overlooked a deep valley, fog swirling below. There was no time to stop. Eli grabbed her hand, and they climbed down fast. Rocks slipped, branches broke, and once, Lura nearly fell, but he caught her, pulling her close. At the bottom, they disappeared into the fog, hearts racing, lungs burning. And behind them, the machines searched the cave, finding nothing. For now, they were safe, but not free, not yet. Asterisk, the fog clung to their clothes like ghostly hands. Each breath Eli took felt heavy, cold, and full of dust. Beside him, Lura stumbled, her legs weak, her skin pale like moonlight. They had been walking for hours without rest, without food, always hiding, always listening. They found a broken bridge deep in the woods, covered in vines, leading to an old trail that hadn't been walked in years. It creaked under their weight, and every step made Lura flinch. Her hand gripped Eli's tighter now, not from fear, but from pain. She hadn't spoken since her translator broke, but her body said everything, her breaths short, her knees trembling, her body shaking, even with the blanket wrapped around her. She was dying slowly, not from wounds, but from something deeper. Eli knew she needed medicine, not human medicine, alien, from her world or something close, but Earth didn't have it. They kept moving until they reached a forgotten place, half buried in the dirt, overgrown with roots. Was a rusted alien symbol carved into a metal door. Lura's eyes widened as she touched it with shaky fingers. Eli asked softly, "Do you know this place?" She nodded slowly and pointed to the symbol. Then she drew another in the dirt, a family crest maybe, or a mission mark, whatever it meant. It gave her hope. Together, they forced the door open. Coughing as dust poured out, inside, the walls glowed faintly with blue light. The outpost was old, maybe years, maybe centuries, but still alive somehow. Machines slept in silence, shelves full of tools and tech, some broken, some untouched. In the corner was a pod filled with dark liquid in tubes. Lyra touched the control panel, her fingers dancing with practiced ease. The screen flickered to life, then showed red warnings. She frowned and sank to her knees. Eli watched as she tapped again and again, desperate. Not working? He asked. She didn't answer, but her shaking head was enough. Her body slumped forward, and Eli rushed to catch her. She was burning hot, sweating, her breathing shallow and fast. He carried her to the side and laid her down gently. Her lips moved, trying to speak, but no sound came. She touched her chest, then pointed to a metal case on the wall. Eli stood up and opened it. Inside were several glowing vials. They looked dangerous, but if they were what she needed, he had no choice. He brought one to her, but she shook her head and pointed to a strange injector device nearby. He loaded it carefully and pressed it against her arm. A hiss, a soft glow, and then silence. For a long moment, nothing changed. Then her breathing slowed, and her eyes slowly opened, weak but clear. She touched his hand, and a single tear ran down her cheek. She mouthed something, and though he couldn't hear it, he understood. Thank you. Eli sat beside her as the outpost lights flickered more strongly. The system had started to awaken. Monitors blinked, old files loaded, and a small console lit up with a red blinking message. He tapped it, and a rough voice filled the air. Speaking in Lyra's language, she turned to the screen, her eyes wide. The message was a distress call sent long ago by explorers from her world. This outpost was not a base. It was a shelter, left behind for survivors. But more than that, the message contained something valuable, a map. It showed other locations on Earth where alien tech had been hidden, maybe even medicine or weapons. Eli studied it, then looked at her. If we follow this, we might find a way to end this. Lyra nodded, her strength not yet back, but her will clearly rising. She stood slowly, leaning on him, and looked at the door. Her eyes were fierce now, not afraid, not broken. But before they could leave, the lights inside the outpost turned red. A warning signal. Something or someone had triggered the motion sensors outside. Eli turned to Lyra. We have to move, she nodded, grabbing a small blade from the wall and tucking it into her belt. They didn't wait, didn't speak, didn't look back, because now they had more than just fear. Now they had a reason to fight. The rain fell like whispers from the sky, each drop tapping gently on the metal leaves of old alien trees. Eli had never seen this part of the forest before. Strange. Glowing plants lit the path in soft green light. It was quiet, too quiet. And even the birds refused to sing here. Lyra walked beside him, slow but steady. Her wounds were healing, but her silence still felt heavy. She hadn't spoken since the outpost, not even with her eyes. She just looked ahead, her grip tight on the small blade she carried. Eli noticed the change, not just in her body, but in her soul. The girl who once trembled in his arms now walked like a fighter. They followed the map from the outpost, deep into alien territory buried beneath the earth. Strange routes twisted around machines half sunk into the ground. Old battlefields from long ago, long before humans even knew aliens existed. The place hummed with forgotten energy. They reached a stone gate covered in vines, with alien symbols glowing faintly across its face. Lyra stepped forward and placed her hand on it. The door opened with a sigh, like the earth itself had been holding its breath. Inside, the room was filled with glass tubes and shelves of old vials. Some glowed bright blue, others cracked and empty. Lyra moved fast now, scanning each one. Eli stayed near the entrance, watching her, guarding her. She found one marked in gold, stared at it for a long time, then looked back at Eli. She held it in both hands and walked over slowly. He didn't understand what it was, but from her face, he knew it mattered. She placed the vial into a small metal box and closed the lid. Then, finally, her voice came, soft and rough. "This will save my people." Eli blinked, surprised to hear her again. "You mean others like you?" Lura nodded. "They are trapped, sick, hiding, but if I bring this back—" She stopped, her eyes falling to the floor. "But I cannot. They'll catch me before I return." Eli stepped closer and said without thinking, "Then I'll go with you." Her eyes snapped up, wide and shining. "You would risk your life again?" He smiled gently. "I already did the moment I picked you up from that pod." Before she could answer, a low hum filled the air. Not natural, not safe. Lura dropped to one knee, ears twitching. "They're here," she whispered. Eli grabbed her hand and pulled her through a side tunnel. The ground shook behind them as something heavy landed. The sound of metal claws scratching stone echoed in the dark. The bounty hunters had returned, but now they weren't just searching. They were hunting. Lura stumbled, and Eli caught her, pulling her into a small crevice behind a wall of roots. They held their breath as shadows passed by. One of them stopped, sniffed the air, then turned away. Eli could feel her heart racing against his chest, and then, for the first time, she pressed her head to his shoulder. Softly she said, "You make me feel safe." He didn't answer, not with words. He just placed his hand over hers, warm and steady. The danger passed for now, but the truth had already settled between them. This was more than survival, more than escape. Something deeper was growing between the two, something neither of them had expected, not in war, not in fear, not in hiding, but in trust. As the stars began to rise above the trees once more, they moved forward again, hand in hand, not just to survive, but to protect each other. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Asterisk, the sky turned red before the sun even touched the horizon. It was not a sunrise, it was fire. Eli stood at the edge of a cliff, his eyes locked on the massive shape breaking through the clouds. A ship, black as night, shaped like a blade, wide enough to block the stars. It didn't roar like normal ships. It hummed like a beast breathing before the kill. Lura stepped beside him, her hand trembling as she whispered, "He has come." The warlord. Eli didn't speak, he just looked at her, the way a soldier might look at a friend before a hopeless battle. But she wasn't trembling from fear anymore. She was trembling from the memories. "That ship," she said slowly. "It took everything from me, my home, my family, my voice." Her voice cracked, but she stood tall. "Now he wants me back." Like a pet who ran away, Eli stepped in front of her and said calmly, "You're not a pet, and you're not alone anymore." The ground rumbled as the warlord's ship descended into the valley below. Its lights searched the forest like angry eyes, dropping machines and trackers and soldiers onto the land. Eli turned to Lura. "If we run, he'll burn everything to find you." Lura nodded. "I don't want to run." Together, they returned to the alien outpost where it all began. The old systems were awake now, buzzing, blinking, listening. The defense console lit up with a deep hum, waiting for someone to take control. Lura stepped forward, her palm glowing softly as she touched the core, her body lit with the same light, her veins pulsing with energy not seen in centuries. The outpost responded not to Eli, not to the machines outside, but to her. "She's not just a survivor," the old AI said through static. "She is royal blood. She is command." Eli stared. "You're a princess?" Lura turned to him slowly. "I was, but I ran from it. But now," she whispered, "I run no more." Outside, the forest exploded with light as the warlord's soldiers moved in. Dozens of them, scanning every route, every path, every cave. The sky above pulsed with energy. His weapon system charging. Lura looked at Eli one last time. "I don't want you to die because of me." Eli stepped forward and took her hand. "Too late for that," he said with a small smile. "You matter to me now." I'm staying, she blinked, something deep moving in her chest. No one had ever chosen her over their own life before. The warlord's voice crackled over the outpost speakers, deep and cruel. Return her to me, and I'll spare your little planet. Lura stepped forward, her voice steady. You took my world, but you won't take me again. Then she activated the ancient defense field. Massive beams of blue energy rose around the outpost, like towers of light. The machines outside screamed as they were cut down by the energy wall. The warlord's ship roared in rage, firing down beams of red light, but the shield held. Lura's whole body shook as she held the command interface. The power inside her was burning fast. Eli rushed to her, grabbing her shoulders. You're doing it. You're fighting him. She looked at him through the light, her face glowing. If I die, will you remember me? Eli pulled her into his arms and whispered, Don't talk like that. We're walking out of this together. The final blast from the warlord's ship struck the field. A flash so bright it turned night into day. And then silence. The dust settled. The sky returned to blue. The massive ship above flickered. Smoke pouring from its engines, it turned slowly, groaning like a wounded animal, and flew away, disappearing into the stars. Inside the outpost, the lights dimmed. Lura collapsed into Eli's arms, her body cold but still breathing. You did it, he whispered, holding her close. You beat him. And in the quiet that followed, she finally let herself cry. Not from pain, but from the feeling of being free. It rained gently the next morning, not like a storm, but like the sky was weeping with relief. The fires had stopped, the lights in the sky had faded, and for the first time in days, the forest was still. Eli sat beside a small bed made of leaves and cloth, his hand resting on Lura's. She was breathing, slowly, steadily. Her face no longer pale. Her body had burned through too much energy when she stopped the warlord's ship, but she survived. He had kept a fire going all night, brought her water, whispered to her even when she couldn't hear. Now at last her eyes opened. She blinked at the soft light, looked around slowly, and then her gaze stopped on him. Eli smiled the moment he saw her awake. Hey, he said gently, you're back. Her voice came out soft, dry, but full of warmth. You stayed. I told you I would, he replied. Lura reached up and touched his face. Didn't have to. Eli leaned closer and whispered, but I wanted to. Outside, the forest had already started to grow green again. The machines were gone, the scanners silent, the enemy defeated. But something else waited now, something harder than war. A decision, that afternoon. Lura stood near the old alien console inside the outpost. The system had repaired itself and opened a new message, one from her people. Her name had been spoken like a song, carried across stars. They thought she was dead, but now they begged her to return, to lead, to heal, to be what she was born to be. She sat in silence for a long time. Eli watched her, not saying a word. Finally, she turned to him, eyes filled with storm and sorrow. They want me back, she said. You should go, he said quietly. They need you, she nodded, looked down at her hands and said, but I need you. Eli didn't move, didn't breathe. Those 4 words were heavier than any battle. He stood, walked to her slowly, and said, you don't have to choose. Not alone. She looked up at him, her voice shaking. I thought no one would ever see me, not really see me. I saw you the moment you fell from the sky. He said softly, not an alien, not a weapon, not a target, just someone who needed a reason to stay. The stars shimmered as the small transport ship landed nearby, sent by her people. Quiet and respectful, Lura stood at the edge of the ramp, looking back at him. The wind pulled at her hair, her coat, but not her heart. She turned around, walked back down the ramp, and placed something in his hand, a ring of woven metal and crystal, glowing faintly. It means bonded in. My world, she whispered. I want to build a new world with you. Eli stared at the ring, then at her, and all he could say was, I thought I was saving you that night in the forest. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. But you saved me every day after. They stayed on Earth, in the same quiet cabin where it all began. The trees grew taller, the stars seemed closer, and whenever they looked at each other, there was no fear, no pain, no past, only peace. And love, real love, the kind not bound by planet, by language, by blood or species, the kind born in fire, built in silence and sealed in sacrifice. And so, under a sky that once fell apart, a human and an alien girl wrote a new story together, one not of war, but of hope, forever.